Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast here on a Wednesday. As we've already talked about the guards and the wings on Monday and Tuesday, we're here on Wednesday. So you guessed it, time to talk about the big fellas here as we get ready to discuss the backup center position, how important it is for the Philadelphia 76ers. It's been discussed at length over the last couple of seasons at behind Joel Embiid. So we might as well do it again with that number 16 overall pick. Is there anybody that you may like? Well, we'll run out a few names, and we, meaning Derek Bodner, to my left, Kyle Neubeck to my right. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna's producing. You people in the chat, I'm already seeing it. Yes,
sick and tired of you people.
Edey would get torched in the playoffs. All of this stuff, there's some things already. I'm sick and tired of you people. Got a lot of things to say.
Festivus
on Seinfeld. Got to bring out the Christmas poll is what they call it. But yes, Ramid, we are live. Let's talk about it. And as we do talk about the big fellas here, again, it has been discussed a lot over the last couple of seasons with Joel Embiid being, of course, the face of the franchise and wanting to know if they have the right people behind him because, why? He missed a lot of games. So whenever he's off the floor, like we talked about in the postseason, we would get into debates. I know I did. Oh, Paul Reed, the time that he was on the floor, this is why they lost. Well, was it really? But in this case, can they find somebody that can give you some minutes there, some better minutes that's going to be there for you in the future, maybe a better offensive skill set there? Or is Paul Reed going to still be there? They'd be the third option. How is this all going to play out? So as we look at the big guys here, we will talk about so many of these different names, talk about some association things later on. And as always, when we do our draft talk, the show is presented by our good friends from Rothman Orthopedics. We'll talk about them a little bit later. Yes, thank you, Rothman. But we go to you, Kyle, to start things off here as we talk about the backup position for you. Looking at the season overall, if people have been paying attention to us, or maybe even some of the new folks who didn't get the no Bamba experience all season with you and how you felt about it. Some of the good things you had to say about Paul Reed and then some of the tough things and critiquing what he did in his time out there on the floor. In this upcoming season now with where we are, how important do you feel that backup center position is for the Sixers?
Well, it'll always carry a level of importance in the regular season. My position has long been that their struggles in the playoffs, specifically when Joel hits the bench, are less about having this specific center on the floor and more about the lineups altogether not being good enough to either win or at least, hold the fort down in those minutes. Some of that is not having a good enough third, maybe fourth guy, right? Like I think we're now at the point where all of us believe in Tyrese Maxey, second option, guy who's going to run the show when Joel Embiid hits the bench, right? Like I think we all feel pretty confident about that. But he's going to need guys to help him there. It can't just be Tyrese go out and score every possession or we don't have a plan. There does need to be some form of secondary creation, secondary offense. You need to be able to build a credible defense, I think just as importantly, without Joel Embiid, because so much of the team's identity on that end of the floor is tied into how good Joel is as a rim protector, how successful he can be in drop coverage. And so I am willing to entertain the idea that you use pick 16 on a big. I actually like some of these guys we're going to talk about today, which if you guys have listened to the last couple of shows, there are a lot of these players that I just don't think really make sense for the Sixers. But I think Derek probably feels even stronger on the idea of if you're going to take a big, just trade the pick or do something else because he doesn't value the backup center for Joel all that much on a general level. And I do think overarching idea is that if Joel is hurt, when Joel is hurt, you're kind of screwed anyway. And so I don't want to invest too much in a guy who's just going to play when you really have little hope anyway.
Yeah. So I think conceptually, not in the Sixers specific instance, I would be okay with drafting a number of these players and being like, all right, maybe this will lock down your backup center for a 4-year stretch at a low salary, and you don't have to worry about it. Especially if you then bring back, let's say, one of the guys in Edey, you bring back, Paul Reed, you now have two very different stylistic backup centers. Depending on the matchup, depending on your needs, you can throw either one of them out there. I think that can be, I think there can be a conversation for that. My concern is where the Sixers sit, particularly where the Sixers sit with the salary cap. Like we've mentioned a bunch, you have that, $49 million slot to, we'll just call it Paul George right now, just filling in a name. Who knows what will happen. But after that, you have then a $15 million slot after that in terms of cap space. If you keep this pick, that's down to $11 million in cap space. That's less buying power than the mid-level exception. I think that is a pretty significant drop in the kind of free agents you can try to attract. And because of that, this player that you draft, if you draft someone at 16 and you eat into that cap space and you get below the mid-level because of it, they have to be able to play more than 10 to 12 minutes per game, and they have to be able to play in the playoffs right now. And none of these guys, as good as they are, either they can't play next to Joel Embiid, or you can't necessarily look at them and say, all right, well, our backup center solution is solved. No matter how polished they are, no matter what skill sets they have, that's a tough ask for a big man to come into the NBA and be effective, especially defensively, especially in the playoffs. So if you're not going to be able to do that, and you can't project a role alongside Embiid long-term, then I don't really have much interest in rostering a center with the 16th pick. Like I said, it's one thing if we were talking about someone like Bub, who we talked about yesterday, and you can say like, all right, well, in 2 to 3 years, he might be able to grow. He might be able to play alongside Tyrese Maxey. He might be able to give you some on-ball, off-ball equity. Sure, I can talk myself into eating into my cap space for something like that. But for a big man who I never project will be able to play next to Joel Embiid, who I never project will be able to play more than 10 to 12 minutes because of that, and who I can't slot into a backup or into a playoff rotation right now, it's tough for me to then say, yes, I'm going to buy into that with limited upside, no guarantee of the current, and also while doing that, eat into my cap space this summer, which I need not for a player to play 10 minutes per game, but hopefully for a player to play 30 to 35 minutes per game and be a starter, because right now you've got 2 players in Embiid, Maxey, and Ricky Council on your roster, and that's pretty much it. People will make the argument that, no, you have to solve this. You have to get a backup center. Backup center is a need. Yeah, it's a need. So are 3 starting slots. So I can't limit what I can do to fill those 3 slots just because you also have a need at backup center.
All right, so let's start with the guy.
So I'll just walk out since I say I don't want any of them. I'll leave. You guys
Show's
can finish
over.
the show.
Goodbye.
Let's start off with the guy who is the feature. And, of course, he is the feature of the big man in general for this draft, even though he's projected later on in that middle to late first round.
Certainly the most well-known.
The most well-known for what he did collegiately, and he is, again, the photo for this start of our show here. And that is Zach Edey from Purdue, Derek. And he's 7'4", guy who averages 20-plus, close to 12 rebounds, shot it in terms of field goal percentage very high because he plays very close to the rim, folks. What you want from a guy who is 7'4" and is a big dude. So when you look at Zach Edey for the situation here potentially, and just a player translating into the NBA, what are you looking at from Zach Edey, and how would that fit here in Philadelphia?
Well, he's huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Massive.
7'4",
Big boy.
7'11" wingspan, 9'7" standing reach.
How tall is Boban? 7'4", 7'5"?
Right around there.
Yeah.
I forget exactly
Okay.
where.
All right.
But Boban-esque. Look, he's a skilled post-up big man who rebounds the heck out of the ball. And because he's huge, can block shots. It really, and you're going to play him in a drop almost every time. You're going to run offense off the bench through him, in theory. Certainly, that's the way it was, not off the bench, but running offense through him at Purdue. He had a massive...
That's a new one.
We talk a lot. Every now and then it doesn't come
Sound
out
like a Jetsons character. Gazoo.
He had a massive usage rate the last 2 years. He, I think, got better as a passer. He's not a great passer, but he will make these simple reads that he has to, especially when double-teamed. He will do a little bit of rim running because he has good hands and he's tall and he's a big target, but you didn't really see a lot of short roll type stuff. And I think that's one area where when you're projecting him in the NBA, he's going to get post-ups. He's still 7'4". He's got pretty good touch. It's not just that he's big, but he's got a hook shot. I think he's developed that over both shoulders, especially over the last few years. He's gotten better at that. He can get to his moves, and I think he will have matchups where he'll get to his moves effectively in the NBA as well. Just not as consistently and not against every matchup like you could in college. So you're going to need him to do more rim running. Because of that, I would like to have seen more maybe passing out of the short roll because you're going to need to build that with Maxey. But really the question mark, it's one thing to have questions offensively. You'd love to see like a mid-range jumper. He didn't really have much of a mid-range jumper. He was an okay foul shooter, but never really in game. But the questions come defensively. And if you draft him, you're locked into playing one scheme defensively. He's going to be a drop big. I think he can actually, I think he held his own the last couple of years at Purdue in a drop, in part because he's huge. And
we're going to just continue to say this guy's a unit, an absolute unit.
I think he probably moves his feet better than someone like Boban. Let's say.
Does. Yeah, he
does. And has improved over the course of his time at Purdue.
I think because of his size and because he's not a complete stiff defensively, he impacts more shots in a drop than I think maybe he's given credit for. Obviously, that's going to be tougher in the NBA when ball handlers are pulling up from 27 feet out and there's more space and you're going to ask more of him. And I have significant concerns there. But part of my concern is I just don't want to get completely pigeonholed into one scheme. I would like some scheme diversity on both sides of the floor, by the way. I would like to be able to run a 5-out at times on offense. I'd like to be able to run switching. Not that you're going to be able to be a true switch with Tyrese Maxey, but I'd like to do more of that with the second unit. He doesn't really add any of that. He's just a lesser version of the scheme you already run, lesser version on both ends. But I'm not completely like if the Sixers weren't in the salary cap space that I laid out to start this, I wouldn't be completely against Zach Edey, even though he's an archetype that I don't really like for the most part. I think he's actually a pretty good version of that archetype, or at least a pretty reasonable chance to be a decent version of that. But he'll never play next to Embiid, and because of that, I have little interest.
You sound like you're on Shark Tank, and for that reason, I'm out. So I think Derek and I are going to be in lockstep for a lot of today. I like Edey. I'm not one of these people that's, looks at the defensive concerns and says, well, there's no role for him in the NBA. My problem with him is you basically have to full commit to his style in order to justify putting him on the roster and playing him, even like in a 15-minute role. If he's on the floor, you are committing to, we're going to run the offense through him. We're going to get him post touches, because otherwise there are just too many issues that you're not getting the value out of him that you need to. To his credit, as Derek said, the thing I like is that he's just a really well-realized big. He's a big man who plays like a big man, who takes advantage of his size, strength advantages over guys, constantly gets the seal, constantly gets the good position, has the touch on top of that. So, if he gets surrounded by guys and he's going to face double teams often, I still think he's got a great chance to score with the hooks over both shoulders, going off the glass, things like that. And obviously he's big enough that he gets deep. That's an easy dunk on a lot of opportunities. Also a great offensive rebounder. Some of that is by necessity because he is not running up and down the floor real fast. So you might as well hard commit to playing around the rim. But for a team that needs rebounding, certainly a guy that could help them there. The issue that I have is that when Joel is off the floor, and you're trying to build an identity around Tyrese Maxey primarily, I think Edey potentially cuts into what you want and can do there. It's not to say that you need to, Joel hits the bench and you run. But if you, however the roster fills out this summer, if you get some athletic wings, if you get some guys that can play a more high-tempo style with Maxey, if Edey's the guy that's coming in on that unit, it doesn't really matter. Like, you're going to have to spend a lot of your possessions walking up the floor, waiting for him, getting him the ball. And it will be worth it a decent amount of the time because I do think he will come in and he's so big that, like, there are some guys that they're 3-4 year players in college, have size advantages, and then they get to the next level and the margins shrink and it's like, well, that guy can't really do this anymore. Like, I think Jahlil Okafor was an example of that, right? Like, he was a really skilled post-up big, but was not huge.
Yes.
And so once he got and played like-sized players more often, it became a lot tougher for him. I don't think there are a lot of like-sized players for Zach Edey. To your point, Derek, I believe his standing reach is almost exactly the same as Boban's. They're like right in that same territory. And I think he's a much more polished player than Boban.
And like I said, I think more mobile too.
Yes, and more mobile. So I do think he can help a second unit. If you're just looking for a guy, like, we can throw him the ball, run offense through him, and expect him to score. And he can make free throws, which is a really good thing for a big that is likely going to get hacked and fouled and whatever. I just don't trust his ability to defend in space. I don't frankly trust him to get up and down the floor at the level requisite in today's game, where transition threes, transition defense it's just such an important part of the game. So I actually like him, but I would basically only draft him if I was willing to full send my identity around 48 minutes of slow drop coverage, play through a big man, and I just do not want to do that.
That is another thing. He slows you down on offense, not just because you're looking to post him up, because it takes him a while to get down the court, and you're gonna be able to attack defensively in transition the entire game too, because he struggles to get back, in part because he's posted up deep into the paint, but in part because he doesn't change direction all that quickly. I agree.
I don't disagree with anything they said on Zach Edey. Nice player. Liked him in college. Some of the stuff you just watch and you say, okay, a big dude can run like this. As the guy said, if you're playing in a track meet type of game, that's not going to be in his favor. But when you look at certain guys that are big, when you watch Boban and you watch him run, sometimes you're like, it just looks uncomfortable because it looks like it hurts me to be that big and have to try to run like that. This guy's a little more fluid with it. The footwork is much better. The touch is certainly there. And you can see where there's a place for him in today's game. But when we're looking at some of these other guys that we're going to bring up, we talk about, hey, you may not want a big, and we'll get into, as Derek laid that part out, Zach Edey is going to be a good player, but for this particular situation, that may not work as much as you would like maybe from some of the others. You might want a different type of backup big in this particular case in this organization, partly because of Joel Embiid, but also because of, as Kyle mentioned, the other franchise guy and Tyrese Maxey is their situation. So when Embiid is off the floor, you're going to typically run things through Tyrese Maxey. No, not typically. You are going to run things through Tyrese Maxey. And sure, if a guy gets hot and he has it going in the post, you're going to give him the basketball. There are 82 games and those things are going to happen. But when it comes to Tyrese Maxey on the floor, it's his show. And while he's unselfish, he's going to get everybody involved. I can picture him on the floor with Zach Edey and his blinding speed, the attack to the basket where he's going downhill. And if something happens, I can see, as much as we talk about him not being able to throw lobs, I can see him, because he knows he has a 7'4" guy right there, just dropping it right to him.
Get it somewhere in the zip code.
Yeah. And he's going to catch it, and that's going to make his assist numbers go up. And we're going to be like, Tyrese Maxey's now averaging 25 and 8. But that is going to be sometimes. That's not going to be a majority of the time. So in this case, I'm with them. If they take him, we know why. We just laid all of that out. But maybe not here for this particular situation when it comes to Zach Edey.
Eugene brought up a good point in the chat, though. If he had Boban's sense of humor, I would be all on board. Sign me up right now.
And he does not look like he has that type of sense of humor.
Few people do, though.
I'll say one more thing before we talk about some of our wonderful friends and partners. I do think that while I am not confident he's going to be a pick and roll partner, and especially a short roll guy, there's just no real proof of concept for that. Derek was talking about numbers before the show that he posted up like 64% of his possessions, which is just an astronomical number, even at the college level. I do think because he's so big, he will be a good screener. Like there will be opportunities.
It's hard not to
if teams don't hard trap. Yeah, right. But if teams don't trap Tyrese Maxey, he's going to be able to turn the corner and get to the rim and put teams in a lot of trouble, just because Edey is so big. Again, I have to emphasize, this guy's fucking massive. He's so big that if he makes contact on these screens, there's basically no chance that you have to stay in front of Tyrese Maxey. So there could be some value there. I suspect, though, that teams would just force the ball out of Maxey's hands.
Yeah.
Try to force Edey to make plays in space, and that's where I think he would end up getting in trouble. So like the player, okay, but don't really like him here.
Yep. All right. We have more names to get to. We have about 4 or 5 more names to get to, and we will do that when we get back because you love the big fellas to see if they can play behind Joel Embiid and with Tyrese Maxey. But before we do that, we got to tell you about some other things. And that will be with our good friends from the great spot there with a little help I thought it was help, but I'll go with I think we have the right day. Is it help?
It's better. We're getting better help.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe I'll do that one then, even though.
We ain't really playing today.
We need a little help. and look, as we are here and we're getting ready for the summertime and everybody's getting into their groove here. You're also, maybe some people might be having a little bit of trouble with some certain things, and you want to talk to some people about it. You want to make sure you're going into the summer the right way and have a good deal going on as you focus on what the summertime is. And if that is the case, you're going to our friends from BetterHelp. When life goes fast, it's important to take a moment, celebrate your wins, make the adjustments for the rest of the year. And you can do that by speaking to some people through therapy, and that can help you take stock of your progress and set achievable goals for the next few months ahead of you. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Again, for us, take a moment, visit betterhelp.com/PHLY today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PHLY. Again, that's betterhelp.com/PHLY to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PHLY. And this episode is sponsored and presented to you by our good friends from BetterHelp.
Tell you what, after a brief stumble, you hit the mark on that one like a true pro. We also want to make sure we tell you about TrueMark Financial. Heard from a number.
Hiss with that transition.
Come on, man.
I'm messing around.
We've heard from some people recently who joined TrueMark Financial Credit Union right here in Philly, and it's been an eye-opening to see the difference between banking at a bank compared to becoming a member of a credit union. When you join a credit union like TrueMark Financial, you become part owner, which means profits come back to you instead of going to shareholders. TrueMark Financial has better rates, lower fees, a better return on savings, and more flexible options overall. And of course, the same digital tools and technology we all want. But the best part is TrueMark Financial is local. They're headquartered in Fort Washington, and with 24 branches across the Philly area, they are deeply rooted in our community. They serve our community and only our community, so their investments and programs help our people right here at home. Becoming a member of a credit union has so many benefits over being a customer at a bank. It's a total no-brainer. Head over to TrueMark.com/PHLY to learn more or find a branch near you. That's TrueMark.com/PHLY, federally insured by the NCUA.
All right, let's jump to one of our next names that we're going to get into here on the show. Talk about these front court players that you might have some interest in. Let's go with one also, a bigger name that you probably know, Kyle Filipowski from Duke. Big man who can shoot from the perimeter, has some questions there defensively. Obviously not as big there as Zach Edey with that 7'4" size, but at 6'11", close to 7 foot. He does a lot of good things, but Kyle, there might be some questions of some other things when we're talking about the front court position, specifically the center spot.
Yeah, so offensively, I like him a decent amount. I think if I was going to bet on one of these guys to be a stretch big, it would be Filipowski, because the volume has been there both of his years at Duke. The numbers are a little underwhelming just by the percentages. But I think when you're talking about him versus guys who are either shooting threes for the first time last season or have been up and down throughout their amateur career, I think Filipowski's the guy that I think if he's self-scouting himself, probably knows he has to be a shooter, or his path to being a real rotation big is going to get treacherous. So I would bet on him there. I think he's got good ancillary skills on offense. I think he's a good straight line driver, can attack from the perimeter. I think he can be a functional passer. If it wouldn't shock me if he's like a poor man's Hartenstein in terms of what he can do offensively. And if Hartenstein could step out and shoot threes, he's already a valuable player. He'd be a really valuable player. Unfortunately, the other end of the floor, I suspect, is going to be ugly for Filipowski at the next level. Now, there are some people that are better draft evaluators than me that have kind of downplayed defensive concerns just based on the fact that Duke has been a good defensive team with him on the floor. I would counter that by saying they have a talent advantage against basically everybody they play throughout most of the NCAA season because they are Duke and they have a certain quality of player. He actually has a negative wingspan.
Yep.
It's a quarter inch shorter than his listed height, which I believe he clocked in at 6'10", a little under 6'11", 6'10.75". He's not going to be much of an offensive rebounder. He is not going to be able to play in coverage anything other than drop. And when I say that, like we were talking about this before the show, in Edey's case, he will be a drop-only defender, but Zach Edey has real value at the rim as a rim protector because he's 7'4", has a 9'7" standing reach, was a consistent shot blocker, and a good rebounder. I don't think Filipowski is basically any of those things, right?
He has an 8-inch. Edey has an 8-inch advantage over Filipowski in standing reach.
Yes. So if you can funnel guys to Edey, I think Edey can alter shots. I think Edey can rebound the ball. I don't know if Filipowski can do either of those things. And so you're boxing your team into this very narrow type of coverage, but you're not getting any upside of it. You're just strictly trying to protect him from not having to defend in space, not having to move side to side. He does have some decent, like his hands are pretty good for a big, like he might get some steals from time to time, mix it up in there. I don't think the compete factor is not the worry. Like I do think he'll try. I just think guys are going to get downhill, take it into his chest and score through him, score over him. And I just think it's a recipe for disaster potentially. So even though I like the offensive skill set, and I think it was Slade early in the chat said he was on Filipowski Island.
Yeah.
You might be Tom Hanks and Castaway on this one, brother. So find Wilson, that volleyball, paint a face on it. You guys can hang out there because I am certainly not on it. And I think Derek, I can't speak for Devon. I think Derek actually might be more negative on Filipowski than I am.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to a hard no. Like most of these players here, I could talk myself into them being a long-term play.
And his name's Kyle. You would think like, hey, the fraternity's got to stay together, but
that's Kyle Lowry, man.
I'll take the North Philly Kyle.
I think his defense might be just a deal breaker. I think it might be. And look, if you're going to be that bad defensively and have that limited upside defensively, I have to it's one thing to have skills. And I think he has skills. And I think you laid them out well. I think I trust his shot the most as a sort of like decision maker and a ball mover. I trust him the most, not an advanced passer, but some of that short roll stuff we talked about with Edey. I think Filipowski can do it. He has a lot of different ways to contribute offensively, but I'm not sure he's great at any of them. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing, like a lot of the names that you will hear people bring up, they're great. Like people will, well, Markkanen's not a great defender. Well, Markkanen's an elite shooter. Elite shooter. Even someone like Kelly Olynyk, I think coming out was a better shooter, at least a shot that I trusted more. There's just not, in order for me to buy into this kind of archetype, I need to truly believe he can be elite at something offensively, not just be a versatile offensive player. Otherwise, I'm going to go back to the defense, go back to how limiting I think his defense will be, and I just don't see it. I don't see the elite skill.
Slade says they don't see the vision with the island there with Filipowski. Well, look, some of the things, I agree, stretch 5 here in today's league is going to have somebody who can play much better defense than he at the 4. And who is that? And what is that? Is that the second unit? Is that going to be a guy sitting in the starting lineup? Is a shot going to just be able to, he's going to be able to knock down so many shots that all of that stuff kind of goes away. He also had surgery on both of his hips to repair that. Will that ever come back to be a negative at some point, sooner rather than later? Would that have an impact on how long his career might be? But the defense is a big problem. He does have a pretty good handle when guys close out on him. He can put the ball on the floor fairly well and get to the basket and finish with control, where he's not doing a little bit more than he should be. But that defense is a big problem when you're playing that 5 spot. And the one guy that you can look at and say, all right, compare him to Kelly Olynyk, but Kelly Olynyk, it was a little bit different coming out of Gonzaga, where you, like you said, you definitely trusted that coming out of Gonzaga. But in this case, he's further down on my list as well. And sorry, Slade, that we don't see the vision. You can explain it a little bit more in the chat, but not necessarily for us
Well,
here.
one thing Slade did say is I wouldn't run him as a backup center. He thinks he's physically overmatched. Well, I don't want big men at the 4 who.
No, he would have to be an outstanding shooter to get away with what. Because look, I'm not necessarily opposed to double big lineups, but the second big has to be able to shoot and protect the rim or defend in space. Filipowski's not doing really any of those things. You're hoping that he shoots, but you're not expecting him to protect the rim. He's probably not really helping with the rebounding problem.
Yep.
I think there's some offensive upside there if everything comes together for him. But for this team that is going to need defensive help on that second unit, I would agree with Derek. I'm much closer to hard out, then yeah, bring him in here.
All right, our buddy Bernard McCoy with a super chat. What up, fellas? I blame Embiid's body and the T-Wolves for Boston's championship. If Embiid loses 20 pounds, stays healthy, we will win next year. Shame the Seas didn't have to play the Sixers or the Knicks. Thanks, Bernard. Appreciate it.
If you want to blame somebody for Boston's championship, I think Joel Embiid had a tweet about that. You blame Milwaukee. Blame Giannis.
The Drew Holiday piece.
Yeah.
And then he also said,
GM Giannis really screwing over everybody else in the East, right?
He also said when he was asked,
including himself,
the conversation on the set of the NBA, ESPN, ABC broadcast, where he felt like the Seas were not a dynasty going forward. And part of that is because the East is much better, and part of that also is because he's in the East. And, you know, guys were not healthy in the Eastern Conference, so he's saying that Boston's not only Milwaukee helping them out, but they're lucky that a lot of guys were hurt and they didn't have to face them.
Well, but we did talk a couple days ago about Embiid coming back, probably last week, somewhere a couple days ago, about Embiid coming back, you know, dropping some weight. So we don't disagree with your point. Sure.
Well, and here's the other thing. The Celtics deserve the credit for building the team that they did. I think to the point about the dynasty or the lack thereof, I'm very dubious on repeat champions in general these days. Like, we were a year removed from the Nuggets win the title. They win the finals fairly easily against, you know, obviously not the greatest opponent. The Heat made it through the East playoffs, so you give credit to them, but was a fairly comfortable finals victory for them. We're a year removed from everyone saying, no, Jokic is by far the best player on earth, and the Nuggets are now like the new team of the future, and blah, blah, blah. And everyone's smelling their own farts in Denver and just having a grand old time. And then
entire
a year later,
devoted around smelling farts.
I wouldn't say that. But now we're here a year later. They lost in the second round. Boston, who's had, I mean, Boston's been the best team in the East over the last 6-7 years, just in the aggregate from, you know, the constant conference finals runs. This is their second finals appearance. But I don't know how long it can last, as, you know, they paid Drew Holiday big money. Derek White's going to be up for a payday sometime I don't remember if it's next season or the year after that. He's going to be up for, I believe, some kind of extension. And so it's going to be very tough with the new CBA rules to keep them together, keep them in the current state that they're in. And as we saw, like, you change in and out one or two main pieces. It worked in a positive fashion for them this time, right? Moving Marcus Smart and getting Porzingis, moving Brogdon and Robert Williams and getting Drew Holiday in here. But if they have to turn those guys into other guys to duck under the second apron and keep some flexibility alive, it might go back the other way. So they're the class of the East right now, but I am never comfortable with like, oh yeah, everyone else is screwed for 3 or 4 years. That's just not how the NBA works right now.
No, I didn't like people having that kind of viewpoint when the Warriors were around, and notably Daryl Morey didn't have that viewpoint because he kept chasing a championship even in spite of that. But also, it would be much more difficult, to borderline impossible, to keep that version of the Warriors in place in his current CBA. That is pretty much the main point of a lot of the changes in the collective bargaining agreement. So as daunting as it may look right now, don't completely give up.
Yeah, we keep saying it. Build the best version of your team and what you can do, and that's all you can control. Worry about what you can control, and hope that you get good fortune elsewhere.
All right, more names to come. But before we do, as we talked about it at the top of the show, we are here talking some draft stuff presented by our good friends from Rothman Orthopedics. And if you are dealing with aching joints, hands cramping up, back out of whack, my back is bothering me a little bit. We can talk about that a little bit later, but Rothman's got you. At Rothman's Orthopedic, practicing specialized care has been their passion for over 50 years. And their mission, high quality, compassionate, and affordable care rooted in research leading to new treatments and better outcomes overall. They're Rothman Orthopedics, and they specialize in you. Rothman proudly serves dozens of communities across Pennsylvania and New Jersey with 30-plus convenient offices, urgent cares, and walk-in centers. 200-plus fellowship-trained physicians specializing in specific areas of the body, and a multitude of orthopedic services, including hip, knee, spine, shoulder, and elbow, foot and ankle, hand and wrist, sports medicine, physical medicine, and rehabilitation, orthopedic oncology, and trauma and fracture care. For me, it was the knee, and the foot for my ACL and then my torn Achilles, both playing basketball in the span of 5 years. And that's exactly what I did. I went to Rothman. Dr. Emper took care of my knee. I had a great physician for my Achilles. I'm almost back to full 100% health to be able to playing again. And that is because of the care that they took care of me when I needed the most. For more than 50 years, they have participated, Rothman, in 1,000s of groundbreaking research and clinical trials with the goal of advancing knowledge, development, treatments, and improving outcomes for the better benefit of their patients, me being one of them. Rothman Orthopedics specializes in orthopedics, and you visit rothmanortho.com/PHLY to learn more and make an appointment today.
We also want to make sure we tell you about Sleep Healthy PA at Sleep Healthy.
Keep going.
Keep going. Derek didn't read his Slack today is what this comes down to.
At Sleep Healthy PA, they are committed to helping Philadelphia residents stop the snore and find solutions for sleep apnea that will allow you to rest and improve your health. What causes sleep apnea? There is a choke point in the throat that causes snoring. Dr. Andrew Cohen, a board certified in dental sleep medicine, and his staff will work one-on-one with you to provide first-class care that will meet your needs. Many physicians aren't equipped to provide other options outside of CPAP machines. More than anything, he just wants to see patients healthy. Tired of CPAP machines that are cumbersome? Is your significant other tired of it too? Side note, 50% of divorces cite snoring as a main issue. Sleep Healthy PA is based in Jenkintown. He's worked for years to educate dentists across the country on his personal approach to helping those with sleep apnea. His team is committed to stopping the snore. Tell him PHLY sent you and receive 15% off your initial workup. Here's a quick rundown of the process. There's an initial 2-hour exam split into 2 sessions, one for information gathering, including medical history and imaging, the other to review results and share recommendations. If you're experiencing sleep apnea and are looking for a custom solution to stop the snore, reach out to Dr. Andrew Cohen at sleephealthypa.com or call 215-337-2501. Tell him PHLY sent you.
And we are a week from the start of the NBA draft on the Wednesday night for round 1. Round 2 will be on Thursday, so they've separated the days, Wednesday and Thursday, 8 p.m. start time on Wednesday, and you'll have us for the entirety of the first round on Wednesday as we broadcast live from Garage Fishtown, June 26th, 8 p.m., live draft show with Derek, Kyle, Rich, and myself, Rich Hoffman. And we will be there as we get ready to talk about maybe Zach Edey in this conversation. Kyle Filipowski at some point, maybe not to the Sixers, but we'll certainly break down the first round, how it's shaping up, what happens leading up to that 16th overall pick for your Philadelphia 76ers. And maybe, just maybe, there's a trade in there somewhere where we have to discuss that. So if you're able to come out, make sure that you do RSVP because we're going to have some giveaways with some Sixers memorabilia, some PHLY apparel that's there as well. Maybe you'll like things so much that you'll sign up to become a diehard to get information on these types of events that we do, in fact, have upcoming when you check out the calendar at allphly.com. So again, a week from tonight, 8 p.m., 7:30, where you get to talk with us off the air to get our thoughts before we start on air as the draft begins. 7:30 for that, 8 o'clock at that point. Winona says she's going to be a guest host. We'll take that. And then also we'll get into a lot of things happening with the Philadelphia 76ers that night from Garage Fishtown on Wednesday, 8 p.m. live draft show. It's a big one. So sign up. Come on, everybody. RSVP so we can get a big group of people there to talk about a lot of things.
They might not make a pick, but we'll have a good time.
Hey.
And by the way, I
found your Slack message, by the way.
Yeah,
It's
good
okay.
job. Martian Lynch talking a lot of junk today, trashing our good friends, making a joke at the expense of our good friends at Rothman, saying better off with Hyman Roth. He ran into the wrong one in Rocco Lampone a long time ago, buddy. No Hyman Roth in here. Get him out of here. Get him out of here.
Get him out of here. It's a good.
Just like Michael did.
There's been a lot of interesting names as with the Edeys and the Kyles in there in the chat. Some really good, fun stuff.
You know I
good
love
nature
Martian
with
and all
our
our
community
other people
in
here.
there. We love you guys in general. All right, let's get to another name because we are rolling already with this particular show. Let's go to a guy that we've talked a lot about off air, and that's DaRon Holmes from a center from Dayton, 7-foot guy. Interesting prospect for a front court player at the 5. Does a lot of good things. 20 points, 8.5 boards, 2 blocks, shot 54% from the floor. Can shoot from the perimeter at 6'10", 220. And Derek, when you look at him, What does he bring to the table? Is he a potential fit?
Yeah, he's interesting to me because I can see him being pretty good at a lot of things offensively while still being competent defensively. You brought up the jumper. I think there is projectability in that jumper. I think he's a decent enough decision maker, swinging the ball around. I think he can set screens on the perimeter, and I think he moves his feet just enough. I don't think he's necessarily great changing direction in space, but I think he's good enough with just enough shot blocking equity that he can, there's a little bit of scheme diversity. I'm not convinced he can be a switch defender. Like I said, I'm not sure his hips change direction quite quick enough. And he's not like elite in terms of his ability to jump out as a drop, but I think he can incredibly hold his own sort of in both schemes. So the combination of the floor spacing, which I think can grow, maybe the short roll game, a little bit of passing to move the ball around, and being competent enough defensively, I think there's projectability in terms of him being one of the more, versatile players among this group. I'm not sure I 100% buy into anything. Quite frankly, if you did buy 100% into either end of the court, he'd be a top 10 to 15 pick, not a 15 to 25 pick. But I think if you squint, and I think if you believe in him, I could see some people really believing in him.
Yeah, I think he's the guy that you say, maybe he's not a true home run swing, but he's to your point, Derek, he can do a bit of everything, and that gives you a lot of different options in how you assemble lineups with the backup groups. Like if you want to play drop, good shot blocker, good athlete. Actually, from what I saw, I don't know if this is actually true or if it's based on bad measurements at different times. I think he grew a couple of inches between his senior year and in college.
A database.
So that's, again, the measurements in high school are always
not
like,
great.
I don't really trust them. But if that's true, a little bit of a late bloomer who's figuring things out. And I think you can see with those types of guys, they feel more comfortable defensively in a variety of different setups, right? Like as a true rim protector playing drop coverage, as someone who can, to Derek's point, I agree. I'm not going to ask him to play full switch every minute of a backup lineup that you're playing, but I think he can step out with a small guy to the right place on occasion, and with time become a better defender in that way. And then on the offensive end, had a huge leap forward this season as a shooter. If you buy the shot, you add that on top of, I think he's a real projectable rim to rim guy, soft hands, good screen setter, good lob threat. As long as you're keeping him within kind of a narrow area there and not asking him to do a lot of creating, which frankly, any backup big, I'm not asking to create almost anything. I think you can get a lot of value out of him on that end. The main questions for me are less about skill set and more just, how much of this was done against the lower level of competition in the Atlantic 10. Are you buying high on what was an outlier shooting season? If he doesn't shoot, I'm not super convinced on the secondary stuff he can do on offense. So then he just becomes, all right, he's a rim to rim big, and he'll finish some lobs, but otherwise, like, I don't know how much he's doing. I do think he's got the best combination of skills. And I think if you're talking about buy-in, which often is really important for these backup guys, I think he wants to do all the things that a big guy has to do. Wants to rebound and pursues hard. Wants to defend. Wants to come out, set good screens, make contact, and then roll hard. Because some of these, including a guy we're going to get to, some of these guys are more, I'm going to slip the screen too early, and so then the ball handler is not getting as much separation from their man, cuts down on the passing angles, cuts down on the pull-up jumper opportunities. And so I think Holmes plays like a big and wants to be in, like, he's okay with being in that secondary, I'm just running around being the outlet for my guard, my pick and roll partner. So I like him a lot in that regard. If I was going to take one of these guys at 16, I think it would be him. I don't think he's certainly not like a star hiding in plain sight or anything, but I feel decent about his pro prospects.
A lot of good stuff to like about him. The shot on the outside, as you said, is it real? Is it not the one thing? Even though he made a decent amount of them this year, the balance still looked a little bit off. We'll like to see that improve if that is the case, if he's going to take a little bit more on this level. But everything else, he can shoot from over either shoulder, left, right, with the jump hook. As Kyle just laid out, for me, the one thing that watching him and talking about him is he wants to be really good. He wants to be great, but he also understands who he is. He doesn't try to do too much and get outside of himself.
I was going to say, you want to do the Paul Reed cough. That's the time.
That's going to hurt the team. This guy is, I'm all team. I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. If an opportunity presents itself for me to put the ball on the floor because, I can do that and I can finish at the rim. I have good extension on my drives where I can maybe dunk on somebody, finish a little bit with some creativity there. Maybe a little bit out of his comfort level, but still trying to make a good play and make the shot. All of that stuff is the positive that is there because he can do so many of those things. He can rebound the basketball. He can defend the rim a little bit. And again, he seems like he's coachable. So with that coachability there, if he's willing to absorb all of that, that just spells this guy has a chance to be successful in the league in the role that is given to him. And maybe he does develop at some point where he gets to the end of his rookie deal and he has made his name into something much bigger than we expect. And he can move on and be that other guy. But for right now, at 16, it would not be a bad choice if, like Kyle said, you have to pick with Holmes. So good stuff.
By the way, the open rumor seems to be that the Nuggets promised him at, I believe they're at pick 28.
He
so
shut down his workouts.
Has not been working out for teams. But that's out there right now. I can't 100% confirm it, but most of the people that are plugged in on the draft seem convinced that that's his floor.
The interesting spot, though,
and I think
is that
Gavoni
in some
said
of these,
that directly.
The interesting spot, though, in some of these mocks outside of Gavoni is that he is moved up in these other mocks that project him out because of some of the workouts that he did have before shut down, that other teams are really starting to like him, including maybe, at least doing their homework, the 76ers as well. Let's keep it going because we do have a few more names to get to. One of the names, we want to go to Baylor. We talked about Baylor yesterday, and we're going to talk about Baylor again because we've got Yves Missi, a center, young guy from Baylor, some Cameroonian roots there. Also, a big fella that is a physical type of big, a little more raw when it comes to the offense. At least, you say that because that guy is finishing right there, 5 feet and in.
Yeah.
But he's a physical guy. He has some good tools as a big man coming out of college with a lot of work to do, but a decent prospect.
Yeah, I mean, he's your prototypical rim runner. Like, set a screen, dive to the rim, get a lob, maybe.
Clint Capella style big.
Yep. And I think it's pretty easy to evaluate him in that regard. Obviously, he has great vertical pop. He has good length. That comes across on defense as well. I do think at times he can be a little over-aggressive on defense, and that leads him to be out of position. That leads him to fouls, but I think there's a lot of raw tools where he can be an impact defender and a rim runner. Can he do much outside of that? I'm not sure. His free throw shooting was not great in terms of percentages or in terms of repeatability. Didn't really show much as a jump shooter in game action. But his appeal is he is big, he's athletic, he's a rim running big who can catch a lob, finish down low, and protect the rim.
I always tend to like guys who play really fucking hard, and he does. And I think that's most reflected on the offensive glass. He was an outstanding offensive rebounder. Now, granted, in limited minutes, and one of his problems that he ran into was, well, it's twofold. One, he fouls too much. As Derek mentioned, he can be too aggressive. He's over jumping. And those are things that I think will come with time. That tends to be a lot of under-polished 19, 20-year-old bigs are guys who are just leaping at everything. So that would be a problem in the short term. If I had that
kind of size and athleticism, I'd try to block fucking everything, yes.
But I would rather have those problems than a big man who is, kind of floating through the game and whatnot. And I think over the long term, he's going to be a great rebounder on both ends. It's more on offense right now. His strength issues at present allow him to get moved around a little bit on defense, but I think the fundamentals are there. Wants to box out, wants to hit a guy, and not just, he's not one of those guys. There are a lot of people at, 6'10", 7 foot, whatever, good wingspan, good hops, who just want to jump at everything or rely on their athleticism. I don't think he's that type of guy. I think he has pretty good fundamentals defensively, even if the numbers have not been there quite yet. And I do think over the long term, again, I would probably put him in a similar category as Holmes, where I certainly don't think he's a true switch defender now. I don't think he's going to get there, but I think he can at least hold up. Like, I think he has enough side to side quickness and flexibility that eventually he'll be okay on switches, and you hope that he's good enough as a rim protector drop guy that you're just getting a little bit out of him otherwise.
And I mean, he's got 2 inches in height on Holmes, 2 inches on standing reach, I think. So I think he's a more reliable, not just like occasional shot blocker, but like impact, deterrent.
Legit rim protector, shot dissuader, however you want to frame that. The offense will be an adventure if you're asking him to do literally anything other than catch the ball and dunk.
It's like a Bismack Biyombo experience in that way.
And look, he is the one that feels to me most like, oh, that's just a 19-year-old big, right? Like he has all the over-aggression, too many fouls, can't play enough minutes, not a good free throw shooter. One of the other things is that when he pulls down an offensive rebound, this I think can be coached out of him. There's almost zero chance he's going to pass it. I'm trying to go back up with it, whether it's a smart thing.
I did it twice. I can't do it.
A smart thing or not. And it's like that's just, you can coach that out of somebody, but it's going to be
sometimes.
To an extent. Like, I do think he's someone who's just going to try to.
In all seriousness, like Paul Reed got better at that this year. I don't think he went back up every time with the offense.
And so I think that's something that he could probably be coached on. But he's not going to have a ton of versatility. I like him as a long-term rotation big in general. At 16, it's probably a little too high for me, but I do like him.
So to your point, Sean Ford in the chat says, no project players while in win now. Please at least have a skill where you can play the 4/5.
I mean, is defense not a skill? And I think he'd be a project, but I think a lot of times when people say that, they mean get me the offensive guy.
Yep.
But my larger point is, don't expect anyone really to come in here and be a guaranteed. You can slot him in as a backup big man, because that is usually too much to ask out of a player drafted 15 plus.
All right, let's get to our final one here, just because of time wise. We got to go to Indiana with this big man center, Kel'el Ware, 15.9 points per game. So let's average that about 16 points, 10 boards. Close to 2 blocks right there, 1.9 blocks, 58% from the field, 42.5% from three-point range. Not good at the free throw line with 63%. And he is at least measured out right now, 7 feet tall, 223 pounds. I don't know about the combine exactly, so I may be a little off on that. But decent athlete, a lot of stuff there, Kyle, where there are things to like. There are things that maybe you don't like. Again, that's why we're talking about in this range of 16 on out for Ware.
Yes. So I'll start with the negative, because I think you like Ware more than I do, and I'll let you do the optimist case.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to the last two guys we talked about, where part of the reason I'm in on them is I think they play hard and I think they want to play like bigs. I'm not sure that that's the case with Ware. And some of what I've heard from people I talk to in the scouting community to get a better feel for these guys, because look, transparently, I don't watch as much as the people who do.
You shouldn't listen to anyone on this panel right now. Nobody.
I trust other people on these guys more than I trust my ability to, evaluate them in smaller samples, the people who are boots on the ground all the time. And the big knock I have heard on Ware is that not sure that he's going to give 100% effort, not sure if the care level is there. And that is a much bigger deal to me. The longer I cover the league, the more you're like, does this guy love the game? Does this guy play hard all the time? Is he a culture setting player? Is he somebody that in the summertime is adding things to his game, becoming a more well-realized version of himself? And the book on him is that he's really talented. There's production there. You can see, if you look at all the different things he's added that he can do. He's got the great shooting season. With more minutes last year, his numbers went way up after transferring. That's certainly to his credit. Mm-hmm. But if you're disappearing for entire halves at a time when you're one of the feature players for a team in college, I'm not sure that I can trust you as so look, if you're coming in as a big to this situation, more than likely you're in a 3-man rotation in the front court. There will be nights you don't play. There may be weeks at a time that you're not playing. And you need to have the mentality that we saw from guys like Ricky Council, like an older guy in campaign, where their number is not going to get called for a week and a half, 2 weeks, maybe longer than that at a time. When their number's called, they're coming in and it's like they're shot out of a fucking cannon. I don't see that with him. And it's one of the reasons I would fade him over the long term. I think the talent is there. I think that he has certainly shown the skills of a guy who can make an impact if it all comes together. I wouldn't bet on it coming together for him because of those concerns. I also think if we're talking about pure skill set stuff, I think he plays smaller than his size a lot of the time. I think he can get moved around. If he's not just going and finishing a dunk, I think when he's trying to attempt layups, he can get hit in his chest and get dislodged fairly easily. That would be a concern on offense. It'd also be a concern as a rebounder on the other end of the floor against bigger guys.
So those things, of course, the part I'm not for the positive things, I'll ignore the part of the motor and the care and all that, just because I hate that too. And you even mentioned Christian Wood a little bit earlier. I can't stand Christian Wood. So when people talk about the Sixers need to sign him, I'm like, no, you don't, because that's a big problem. So with that, same thing with Jackson Hayes. He has a lot of energy, but still, it's like that. I care about the game. When it comes to Ware, for the positive things that I like is the athleticism, the fact that he does run and he can get from rim to rim with some good speed and all of that can get up and down the floor. The ability to finish at the rim with the lobs and the dunks that Kyle is talking about. It's something that we've mentioned a lot with the Sixers that just isn't there with them outside of Joel Embiid finishing at the rim in that way. You need to have that partner to throw it to you. But if you throw it, that guy is going to go up there and get it. So I do like that. I like the shooting. It looks good. How real is it on the NBA level?
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to shoot 40+%.
Not
but
even that high.
If you look at mechanics, it's not the trebuchet that Paul Reed is loading up.
No. And when I talked about balance as much as I like Holmes, when I talk about the balance of him getting that shot off, where in that case, straight on, square up, shooting the basketball, it looks much, much better. So those are the things that I really do like about him. And I think that those things, if he does all of the things that changes that Kyle is talking about, those things could translate really well on a team like this, where you have a different type of five, that is Joel Embiid, that you may not get all that work yourself, but guys are going to get you some easier looks if you have some of the people penetrating and getting to the paint, like Tyrese Maxey, whoever the other guard might be that be on this roster, including Kyle Lowry, if you say you bring him back, and some of the others, that could be there for him. The negative stuff, Kyle is absolutely right. Saw him getting too many times bumped off his spot, back to the basket, trying to use his force to get a good shot closer to the rim, knowing it's going to be a jump hook, or the thing that I hated the most, the fadeaway jump shot. There were too many fadeaways where I thought while he made them, he also had to take them just simply because he got pushed off the spot that he tried to make sure that he had there on that low block. So those are the things that I didn't like. I liked a lot of the good stuff a little bit more, and hoping that if he gets into a good situation on a contending team where he's coached up and he's willing to be coached out of those bad things, there's those nasty things that are there, that he could still become a decent enough player in a spot like this.
Yeah, I don't know if I have that much to add. I think you guys pretty much nailed it. He's massive. Like, he has a huge wingspan. I think his standing reach is only like 2 or 3 inches less than Edey. Like, he can really alter shots. But I agree with both of you. He gets pushed around, and forget about like being pushed around on the block. He just gets pushed around going for rebounds. He gets pushed around inside. I don't know if it's a high center of gravity or the fact that he's pretty underdeveloped physically, but that needs, or if it's mentality, which Kyle alluded to, all of that needs to change. He certainly has intrigue as a rim protecting big man, but I'm not sure it's something I would buy into.
And by the way, because I did the whole, compete factor, character, all that, it is one of those things that in my seat is the hardest to get a feel for. And there are dozens of examples of guys who have gone the exact opposite way that people expected when they were evaluated as teenagers and guys in their 19, 20, 21-year-old seasons. in college. There's actually, so I feel like the baseball community, there's a lot more public scouting data out there dating back to let's say the 80s and 90s. And I remember reading some of these profiles that would resurface on, I think a couple of the examples are like Barry Bonds and Albert Pujols. The Pujols one I remember, he was called like, he's lazy, he's a showboat, like all this thing. And then he has like one of the greatest first 10, 11 years in baseball history. After that was one of the best, most refined hitters that there was. And so you can't put all your stock in, this is what these people think about this guy's work ethic, character, all that. It's part of the picture. And it's why if the options are between guys of similar, if you place them in a similar tier, and I do think it's important to draft in tiers or evaluate players in tiers when it comes to the draft, I will ding a guy that I hear that about relative to guys in that similar area. That's why I'm lower on him here, but he is, of this group, one of the best home run swing type players for all the reasons that Devon laid out.
If he gave a damn, he would be higher, to your point.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be as many question marks, and he'd probably be in consideration for, he's got when you're that big and that athletic and could potentially shoot, even if it's like 37% from three, that's a top 10 pick.
I will say the 3-pointers were on pretty low volume.
Yeah.
I think the shot looks okay, but I think it's on pretty low volume. And I will also say, like, a lot of times when we talk about compete level, some of that comes down to physicality. And a lack of physicality can be masked as a low compete level, and it's hard to distinguish between the two. Like at 25, when he's physically developed, he might all of a sudden look different. He might not change his mentality, but he might look different because he's able to physically hold his own more. But to Kyle's point, we're dipshits on a panel. And I say that. Yes, we are. I say
Speak
that
for yourself.
I say that because I used to cover the draft, and I used to spend all year watching, and I wouldn't comment on a player if I didn't watch at least 20 games for him. And it would kind of annoy me when people would come at the last minute and be like, "I have these strong draft takes." I'm like, "You watch highlights on YouTube. I can tell that." We, in this instance, are dipshits, and you have to lean a little bit more on people who have been doing this all year, have been around the teams, around the players, around the prospects, around people who have worked with the prospects. And if they raise concerns about compete level, then I am concerned about the compete level.
Yep.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it just means that they have been around the situation for far longer, have better information than I do. So I rely on them a little more than I otherwise would.
And also Babby also just brought up Anthony Edwards coming out of school. The book on him was, he floats through games and all that. I'm not saying that Ware is anywhere near Anthony Edwards as a prospect, but it's a good example of you don't necessarily know based on what you hear.
Michael Belfatti, our good buddy. What's up, Mike?
Prince of Porto.
You're dropping some funds again, and we appreciate it.
Some fun coupons.
I'd like to see a show with you driving the Sixers over a 5 to 10 year horizon. You're in charge of the whole thing. How many assets do you sell this year for the window? When do you pull the ripcord? How do you manage the transition, etc.?
It's a good question.
We will add it to the ledger, Michael. I will tell you over the next, let's say, week and a half, it's going to be a lot of the short term. We'll do some reporting on what we're hearing. Certainly going to do the draft show. We'll have a free agency show, which I don't think we've teased yet, as free agency opens next Sunday. So that type of stuff is going to take a lot of our time. But yes, some long-term build shows. This specific show, we can absolutely deliver that for you.
Got you covered, Mike. And as you talk about free agency, a couple of quick hitters here, Kyle. There was a report out there that it looks like, as we all talked about, Pascal Siakam is going to stay in Indiana, and that is going to be close to $200 million on his extension to stay with the Pacers after the success that they had. As Derek just said, shocker.
Then again, I say that dismissively, but like we were expecting to have the same announcement about OG, and we haven't yet. So
very true. That's one. And the other, Kyle's favorite team, at least to pay attention to in the association outside of the Sixers, the Detroit Pistons. They have done it again. They have parted ways with Monty Williams with many years left on the contract and many dollars left on that contract. No more. Trajan Langdon and the front office and the ownership said, get out.
He pulled an eastbound and down and said, you're fucking out. No, it seems the word on the street is that that came down from the ownership level. And Devon, you were saying prior to the show, we all sort of heard this throughout the season, but definitely got louder in recent months. Like, not looking like Monty Williams is long for Detroit. It really is just
unbelievable,
a crazy. You reset the coaching contract market to bring this guy in. He's supposed to be the building block, culture builder, all this nonsense. And he's gone after a year, and you still owe him, what, $65 million?
Yeah. Yep.
Great work if you can get it. And now
6 years,
Monty,
$78 million.
The word prior to him taking this deal was his heart's not really in it. He wanted to take time off. Well, boy, are you going to have some enjoyable time off with that $65 million.
So, I mean, his wife's sick. Like, he has very legitimate reasons to want to take time off. My thing is...
yeah, that is not a joke. Like, and I always advocate for, if you feel that way and the money these guys make and the opportunities are there, take time away. It's almost always better for you.
So my question is, if you're the Detroit Pistons and you wind back the clock a year ago and you know this guy has reasons he wants to be away from the game of basketball, but you're like, I'm going to give him so much money he can't say no. Why would you expect for his entire focus to be on the team? You know his personal situation. You know what he wanted to do. Don't talk someone into coaching. It's probably not going to work out well. They just gave him so much money he couldn't say no.
Yeah.
Literally couldn't say no.
Yep. And now he's got
Wild.
65 more.
That's a getting them checks
him.
Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
right.
Awful situation. He did an awful job. He had other things on his mind, and the situation was just terrible. So, and this is what you get. This is why they are the Detroit Pistons at this stage of that organization. This is why they are the Pistons.
Yeah. Look, and I'll say Monty is whatever we think about him as a coach, he's a good guy. Hope he gets to spend some time with his family and enjoy that $65 million over the next, 5 years, 4 years?
Completely destroyed the market on coaching.
Five left.
Salaries.
He signed a 6 years, $78.5 million deal.
Go buy a private island somewhere, Monty, and just get away.
Absolutely. All right. Well, before we say goodbye in our roll call, we're going to tell you when we're done to go over and check out the post game with the PHLY Phillies group, because they're in the top of the ninth right now, and the Phillies are down 5-2 after a 3-run eighth inning for the San Diego Padres. So there's that.
Doesn't seem great. You know who is great? All our wonderful people who show up for us every single day as Eugene Ross yells, Detroit basketball. Shout out to Eugene.
Correct. What up, Gene?
Thank you to Igavini. Thank you to Kel'el Wilson.
What up, Bill?
Babby.
Spo Babby, what up?
I'm my own yams now.
He didn't like that Derek told us that we're dipshits.
Well,
you dipshits about that specific thing. That's it. I'll stand by that,
Porto, Michael Belfatti. We will.
What up, Mike?
Producer Bree has taken down the note on the future show.
And to be clear, I said
you.
we're all dipshits. I didn't say just they are dipshits.
Spo Babby didn't like it.
Want to be clear.
Martian Lynch, 33, number one Hyman Roth fan
What
in
up,
all
Lynch?
of PHLY. That's tough luck, buddy. I'll put it that way. No spoilers. Sean Ford, thank you for coming through. Thank you to Money Mar. Thank you to my girl Winona, who might be guest hosting at Garage Fishtown next week. We shall see. Provolone John, 3-time Slade hanging out on Filipowski Island with Wilson and whatever torch he's able to make out of coconuts and palm trees. Wawa Marvel.
Wawa Marvel. What up? That's a good
What
one.
up to you, Rick Morse.
Ricky.
Who else is in here today? I think I already said Provolone John, but I love saying Provolone John, so we'll hit that one.
There you go.
Yet again, JS, who I think is that a Jeremy Sochan picture? Hope you haven't heard me talk about Jeremy Sochan on this show, because not a big fan. Not a big fan of how they used him anyway. Sean Sharp, thank you.
What up,
Devon
Sean?
Givens and Derek Bodner, who are those guys? Kelly Oubre, number one super fan. Phil W.
That's who they are.
Malcolm Carrington. Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you to SB Cole.
What up,
SB? We're running out of new names for me to get to.
Right.
There's some from the beginning that Prophet One, Guard Mello. I never know what you're laughing about as I'm playing the big scroll game over
Derek's
here.
last.
This would be my YouTube name.
That's
We
his
also
new name.
had Bernard McCoy with his own super chat. Thank you to Bernard
What up,
for coming
Bernard?
through today. Guys, if you're still here, please hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, hit the bell icon so you get notifications each and every time we go live. If you hit the thumbs up button, we'll be back tomorrow and Friday at 2:30 ready to prepare you even more, even better for the upcoming off season. Big time stuff happening. Thank you to super producer Bree.
What up, Lil? Appreciate
Thank you to
it.
Khalil for a nice compliment on the way out. Goodbye, everybody. See you tomorrow.
PHLY Phillies post game right now.
We all silly like the mayor.